So make yourself comfortable because this is going to take a minute. You've had an amazing career. My guest today has a career that spans 5 decades. He's an accomplished actor of the stage and screen. He's a voice actor, musician, writer, and director. His first love is theater, and he's an alumni of more than 4 seasons with the Tony Award-winning South Coast Repertory. His first role with them was an award-winning anti-war play called We Bombed in New Haven from Joseph Heller and was produced during the Vietnam era. He's worked with such luminaries as Jack Hopsis, who won the Tony Award for Elephant Man, Marsha Norman, who won the Pulitzer Prize for Night Mother, and he appeared in a stunning production of The Education of Randy Newman at ACT in Seattle. He played the Pirate King in a national tour of the Pirates of Penzance with George Rose. He was Rolf in the touring production of The Sound of Music and appeared opposite Diane Wiest in Bonjour la Bonjour in New York. He also shared the stage with Tommy Lee Jones in John Frankenheimer's television production of The Rainmaker and starred opposite Ben Vereen in the cable TV adaptation of the Tony Award-winning Broadway musical Pippen, directed by the legendary Bob Fosse. His handsome looks and impossibly golden hair have made him instantly recognizable the world over. Horror fans know him as Tommy Ross in Brian De Palma's masterpiece Carrie, and as Roger Cobb in the cult hit House. Other horror titles include The Unwanted with former guest of What's Under the Bed and friend to the show Hannah Fearman, as well as a remake of Piranha, The Paperboy, Daddy's Girl, Mirrors 2, Deadland, and Descendant, which he also wrote. Other movies include the cult hits Jawbreaker, The Man from Earth, and The Big Wednesday. There's Baby, The Secret of the Lost Legend for Disney, Sparks, and Butch and Sundance, the early years. Finally, he's appeared on too many television shows to count, ranging from Gunsmoke, Policewoman, Justice League, Heroes, and House, with recurring roles on Models Inc., Top of the Hill, and the Perry Mason series. Did I miss anything? Wow. Oh yeah. Of course, my guest William Katt is a touchstone to the heart and childhood of so many fans around the world for his work as Ralph Hinkley in The Greatest American Hero. William, it's a pleasure to meet you.
Oh yeah, there's that show.
Yeah, that show. Yeah, it's a pleasure to speak with you.
Thank you, man. God, I sound like I'm somebody. The validation.
Well, you are somebody, so you are. You were born in Los Angeles and raised in Southern California in a show business household. Both of your parents were actors. Your father, Bill Williams, was best known as the title hero in 105 episodes of The Adventures of Kit Carson, and your mother was Barbara Hale, best known for her iconic role as Della Street in nearly 300 episodes of the Perry Mason series. What were you like as a young child growing up?
What was I like? Probably a little bit of a rascal, free spirit. At the time I was growing up in Los Angeles in the San Fernando Valley, we pretty much, there was no rules at my house. It was a very rural kind of setting. It was in the San Fernando Valley at the time in the late 50s, early 60s. It was pretty much all, it was still orange groves and dairy farms in the area. So my only rule when I was growing up is I had to be in by dark. So I would go to school in the morning, come home, get on my bicycle and go play with friends in the neighborhood. And we would we'd climb, hang out at all the big fields and throw oranges at each other. And used to be giant fields where the grass would be, 5 feet high, and we'd make tunnels in there and have great wars. And the LA River, there was all the aqueducts that are all the cement little aqueducts around Los Angeles. They were open at the time when I was growing up, and we'd play in there at the parks and climb in old sewers that hadn't been closed up yet. When there was a new housing development, we'd go in there and raise hell with all the 2x4s and the new construction. It was pretty awesome growing up. You know, they still had by my house, you could still find the little red cars that ran down to Los Angeles. It was before they tore up all the tracks.
Wow, that's awesome.
I know, it was pretty bitching. And then I'm giving myself away my age when I'm saying they tore up those tracks early on when I was like 8 or 9 years old. Those tracks got torn up, you know, to make way for all the new roads and housing developments. And slowly but surely the dairy farms and the orange groves disappeared, and just to newer and better housing developments. I had a great childhood, and I got to hang out on the set. You know, my earliest memory is like, you know, from under the belly of a horse, watching my dad do Kit Carson when I was like 4 or 5 years old. I remembered that. And I got to go when my mom was doing the Mason series. That was like a really special day when I'd get out of school and I'd get to go with her before sunrise and get to be on set and drink coffee, because I started drinking coffee when I was way younger than you. And I love coffee and donuts and hanging out on set, climbing around on the old Mitchell cameras and learning how to do the wheels, you know, do figure eights with the cameras, you know, and it was a freaking ball, you know. That's my childhood. That's what I remember. I forgot to say, because it's a big part of my life growing up. My dad always had boats. So I used to hang out in Long Beach, down at the Long Beach Marina. And my dad would put me at a very young age, he put me in a little Sabot sailor with a sail and put a life jacket on me. And my only rule then was I had to stay within the harbor, but I could sail for hours and hours by myself on a little Sabot sailor. And I developed a great love of the ocean. I love that salty brine smell of the ocean. I love the sound of seagulls. It always brings me back to the time when I was a little kid growing up.
That's awesome. Yeah, I was born in Florida and I like feel a calm next to the ocean. It's weird. It's like as soon as I pass the border, I'm like, whoa, like 1,000 times calmer.
Oh,
It's
I know,
cool.
I know. And the smell of the ocean is so awesome.
It's awesome. Yeah. So What's Under the Bed is where I interview horror filmmakers about their biographies, careers, and things that shaped what scared them. Before the influence of movies, what scared you the most as a child? Was there a creature in the closet or a monster under the bed?
You know, my earliest memory of things that scared me was my mom putting me down for a nap when I was just a kid. I don't remember being much more than 3 or 4 years old. She put me down for a nap, and the freaking flies would go, bzz, you hear this fly, and I was always worried that they were going to crawl in my ears. That scared the shit out of me. It's funny because the first true horror film I saw was The Fly. Remember that?
Yeah, I do.
I forget the name of the actor, very famous
Jeff
actor.
Goldblum.
No.
Oh, the old one. I see. Yes, I have seen that one. I don't know the actor either.
Well, Jeff Goldblum's
the other one.
I saw that too. I like it. I mean, Jeff Goldblum is such a marvelous actor.
Yeah.
It was a little more gory. There was a little bit more makeup involved in that.
Yeah. But that's cool that the correlation to your fear being the fly going into your ear and then watching the fly. That's fun. So
you know, the dark always scared me until I got older. The dark scared me, and then by the time I was a teenager, you know, I really welcome the dark now.
Yeah. Many kids are first introduced to horror through fairy tales like Hansel and Gretel or Billy Goat Gruff. This is you as the Flower Prince in the Thumbelina episode of Shelley Duvall's Fairy Tale Theater. Was there a particular fairy tale or children's story that excited you or scared you as a child?
I always liked Hansel and Gretel, and that they had the breadcrumbs and it took them into the forest. Am I thinking of the right story?
I think so, yeah.
And then there was a witch in there that trapped them and whatnot. That was always intriguing to me. Any of the Brahms, the fairy tales, were pretty amazing. Now, let me digress for 1 second. Going back to fairy tale theater, it was really fun playing that part because there was one part where I got to obviously I was playing the Flower Prince, you know, and Carrie. I'm getting mush brain. Carrie Fisher was playing.
Carrie Fisher.
Yeah, and I got to kiss Carrie Fisher. You know, Princess Leia. It was pretty fucking awesome. Yeah, I got to kiss her, and I said at the time she had just married Paul Simon, and I said, Carrie, isn't this really weird? You've only been married to Paul for like 2 weeks, and you get to kiss me? And she said, oh hell, Bill. She said, it's the only time I can get away with it is when I'm working. She was such a love.
That's awesome.
What a
That's
great
awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Turnbull Canyon lies in the Puente Hills Preserve, located near Whittier, California, little more than 20 miles from your childhood home. It's a semi-arid loop trail stretching along 4 miles atop a canyon with a creek below. Over the years, Turnbull has garnered a strange collections of myths, urban legends, and genuine tragedies that have become the source of rumors regarding paranormal activities. It is said several Tongva Indians were put to death in the canyon for rebelling against the Spanish. It is said the spirits of these Gabrielinos haunt the trails, angry and willing to chase out intruders. On April 15th, 1952, the Los Angeles Airport Tower lost contact with the captain of Flight 416. It was Tuesday. The plane was expected to land in Inglewood around 3:30 a.m., but it never reached its final destination. The wreckage of the plane was found inside the canyon by a farmer who saw the smoke. 29 passengers perished, and there have been reports of visitors seeing billows of smoke or hearing residual crashing sounds repeated from decades ago. There's said to be a haunted sanatorium locked behind the gates to hell on the grounds. Rumors of satanic rituals and several unsolved murders all contribute to the stories, and some believers claim the dark energy of the canyon is palpable. Did you hear these stories about Turnbull Canyon, or were there other urban legends and ghost stories you heard about when you were a kid?
I did not. I did not hear about this, and so it's I feel very informed now, and remiss that I wasn't I wasn't apprised of all of that. Gosh, I had never heard it, but that's pretty amazing.
Yeah.
Really do your research, don't you?
Yeah, I do.
That's amazing.
So each of your parents were under contract with RKO Pictures in 1943 when they met on the set of West of the Pecos. They were married a year later and each became known for their roles on television. I want to take a minute to point out the actors your parents shared the screen with. Your father worked with Clint Eastwood, Jimmy Stewart, Elvis Presley, John Wayne, Ronald Reagan, Lee Marvin, and Bob Hope. Your mother was Frank Sinatra's first on-screen kiss. She also appeared with James Cagney, Burt Lancaster, Dean Martin, Rock Hudson, Anthony Quinn, and Robert Mitchum. All the horror fans will appreciate this. Your mother was in 2 films with Lon Chaney Jr. and acted for William Castle, the director of the horror classics House on Haunted Hill, The Tingler, 13 Ghosts, and producer for Rosemary's Baby. Here's a photo of you playing with your father. And here is a photo of me and my dad on a movie set. My parents work as crew, and I've been on each of their sets since I've been born. Our childhoods have some parallels, only you had the added feature of having to share your parents with the world whenever they were home. Can you talk about what that was like and how it informed your career choices once you became a father?
I pretty much was raised, I was raised by our housekeeper, Emily. Forgive me, I forget her last name. I'm so disappointed in myself. From the time I was little, we always had live-in help at my house. To the time I was 14 or 15 years old. In fact, my parents were home very little during that time. My father more so, but he was busy. He would work, and he always had he was built. His other hobby beside his boats, which he always loved on the weekends. But he was a builder. He built a lot of stores in the San Fernando Valley. And so I would spend time with him when he was either at his boat, the Lively Lady in Long Beach, or he was working on his properties, building buildings, which I love to go and help him with. And my mom was always working. I mean, I don't remember much of my mom except in the summers when she was on hiatus, and most of them were called to do other things, you know, like any actor. Today it's even more so. But even then, I mean, they were doing, they did a lot of work with Coca-Cola at the time, in like many stars of that period. They were always doing press junkets. We had lots of photographers coming to our house to take family photos, because my mom and dad, it was like, their thing was that they were a Hollywood celebrity family. And so they always liked to show the two of them with their 3 children, and we had the family dog, and we had kitty cats, and we had animals running around our house, and we lived in a big property in Sherman Oaks. That's what I remember most about my parents and growing up, and how did it affect me, and how, you know, when I started having kids with my first wife, I was already working. And, you know, you hear about me doing the films and the television, but I was always doing theater. So I was constantly away, and I'd be away when, when you sign up to do theater, whether it's LORT or off Broadway, you're signed on for a fairly good period of time, like months, not just a few weeks.
Yeah.
For months. And my kids, probably suffered from that, you know. They won't admit to that now that they're grown and out on their own for many years now. Was different with when my daughter was born. I had got married again, and had a daughter when I was 42 years old, and I was home much more, and much more cognizant of the fact that being away would affect my home life. And I stopped doing as much theater as I used to do in my 20s, 30s, and 40s. You know, I stopped doing that because it does affect, and the family is probably one of the most important things. It was all about me for a long period of time. You know, as an actor, it was all centered around me and getting work and what I had to do to garner that work. As I got older, not so much. You know, I was able to pay more attention to my family, which is why my second marriage now has lasted. We're coming up on a 30-year anniversary here in about a month. So
that's great.
And that wouldn't have happened if I had been away. I think back in 2000. We decided after my long run, when you mentioned it before, I did a long run with Randy Newman up at Seattle, at ACT up there. And after that, my wife and we kind of came to loggerheads, and she said, "You can't be away like this. This is not going to work anymore." So I stopped doing theater like that and being away for 5 and 6 months at a time. And it's worked, you know, for us.
You and your friend Tommy learned to surf when you were 11 years old at Brook Street in Laguna Beach, where goofy surfers love the left peeling waves. And in high school, you'd surf 4 to 5 times a week, sometimes before school. You briefly attended Notre Dame High School at the corner of Riverside and Woodman, where the sisters would swat you with a stick if you misbehaved. You also went to Grant High School and an Army and Navy boarding school. This, I believe, is a photo of you at your prom. What were you like in high school?
That's a photo of me and Sissy Spacek at the time. That's not my prom.
I know. Yeah, I was making a joke. Yeah. Okay. What were you like in high school, and how much of your high school experience do you think informs who you are today?
Man, in high school, I was not a good student. I did not like I did not like high school at all. I was not a good student. The only thing that I was drawn to was music and art. And in my senior year at Grant, I was pretty much getting out of school by 12:30, and two of my classes were art and music. You know, I remember I loved being in the choir, and I loved my art class. And then I had a job. I was working. Oh my God, I worked in two different gas stations during high school. I worked as a busboy at a restaurant, Tail of the Cock, on the weekends, which I freaking loved because they always had a great jazz uh, a quartet playing or some other thing on late Friday and Saturday nights. I just loved that. I was there for about a year. And I surfed. Mainly my main thing in high school was surfing. How early could I get up and go to the beach? And like you said, about 4 or 5 times a week, I was at the beach before school. And then I would go right to school, and I wouldn't shower, and I'd just go to class, wipe the sand off of me and go to class. And then afterwards I go to work. That was my youth and how it affected me as I grew up. The great thing about all of that is that my dad he hated that I spent so much time surfing. He said, you can't make a living with your surfboard, right? And then years later, while he was still alive, I got to do Big Wednesday, the wonderful John Milius film that I did with Jan Michael Vincent and Gary Busey.
Yep.
And John directed, and I was able to say to my dad, see, Dad, I can make a living with my surfboard. It was real cathartic for me.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
In the age of COVID lockdowns, bullies, and active shooter drills, do you think horror movies can provide teenagers catharsis to process these real world fears?
I think so. I mean, gee whiz, it's a scary place out there. The world is much uglier than I remember it when I was your age. You know, it's an ugly place, and when you're watching horror films, what I walk away is that you never know who to trust, and you don't know who the bad guy is a lot of times, or there is a bad guy, but you can't trust yourself, and that's what's happened with our politics. And when we go out in the world, it's like, who do you trust these days? You know, where does the truth lie? And so yeah, I think it has a great facility to help people navigate life by watching these films. There's lessons to be learned.
You dabbled in music and thought you might become a pilot after high school, so you enrolled in Orange Coast College in Newport Beach to study music theory and composition. I've heard you tell the story this way. One day, you followed a pretty girl into an advanced acting class to see if you could get lucky. The teacher knew your parents, you got reacquainted and joined the class. Yeah. This led to a job working the light and sound board at South Coast Repertory. You were asked to fill the role of Fisher in Joseph Heller's play, We Bombed New Haven. And it was on stage where you realized you like to make people laugh. Yeah. My question is, did you get lucky?
No, I didn't. Took me years to get lucky. Oh gosh, took me years to get lucky. No, that girl, I did not. But what resulted was that I found a career for myself, you know. And then what happened? I did have these other plans to fly and do other things, be a musician, and whatnot. But you know, you start making money, and what happens is that you follow the money trail, you know, and that's what I did. I mean, I still love music and enjoy it pretty much every day, but it's just a hobby. And when I've gone out and played, I just finished like 5 or 6 years playing in a little jazz trio, but it's my hobby. Instead of going bowling, I play music. That's what it is.
Your first television role as an adult was in a movie of the week called Night Chase with David Jansen and Yaphet Kotto. who would appear in Alien a few years later. You landed parts in many of the biggest television series of the time. There was Emergency, MASH, Kung Fu, Kojak, Ironside, but it was a break on an episode of Policewoman with Angie Dickinson, where you started developing some attention. Between gigs, you continued with theater while surviving off your unemployment and some money you'd make playing guitar in clubs. In 1975, you and every young actor in the business were called in to audition for the now legendary Carrie Star Wars casting call. Your auditions for Luke Skywalker alongside Kurt Russell's Han Solo can be found on YouTube. Will you support my ongoing campaign to ask Disney to make a horror film set in the Star Wars universe?
Wow, now that's fascinating, Dax. That's a fascinating idea. Wow, yeah, because it could exist in their universe for sure. Have you written letters to them and asked them?
I'm trying to get the signatures first, and then I'm going to, but I've got like every Star Wars fan that I've interviewed has agreed to it. So I'm getting there. I'm getting there.
Hey, well, listen, put me on the list.
I will.
I'll sign that. That sounds awesome. I'd love to see that.
Yeah, that would be awesome.
I don't know. I mean, they did it was so well when they did Alien, so they could do some other creature or monster or bad guy. I think that's a great idea.
Yeah, and they're already putting Marvel with horror movies, so why not bring Star Wars in? So, but like Multiverse of Madness and Werewolf by Night.
Well, I'm sure they'll hear about you talking about it. The people you've spoken with on these podcasts.
Yeah. So you were a front runner for both films and cast as Tommy Ross and Carrie, which would become an essential benchmark of genre cinema. The film was a mainstream breakthrough, garnering Oscar nominations for its cast and bringing together the horror genre with the 1970s New Hollywood. The movie is a masterpiece that launched many careers and was inducted into the National Film Registry in 2022 by the Library of Congress. How did PJ Soles get hurt during filming the prom scene, and what happened when the set caught on fire?
Well, the way PJ has told me the story is that she came to the audition wearing that red hat, and Brian said, "Wear that red hat," and that's why she was so noticed in that cast, because she had that hat. But she's a marvelous actor, and she's had a really, really good career. What was the question?
How did PJ Soles get hurt during the filming of the prom scene, and what happened when the set caught fire?
Oh, that's right. Wasn't it PJ? She had the hose.
She got the hose, yeah.
She got the hose and it broke her eardrum when they were trying to put out the fire or something. One of the scenes. That's all I recall. And the set did indeed catch fire. It was an interior set, and the funny story. The way I remember that is that they were calling to put out the fire, and Brian, the director, kept saying, "Keep rolling, keep rolling." Yeah, that was great. Everybody moved back as the set was burning, and Jack Fisk, the set designer, was there. I remember. That was pretty neat. It was exciting. It was exciting that.
In 1978, you starred with Jan Michael Vincent and Gary Busey in The Big Wednesday, a film about friendship set to the backdrop of surfing and Vietnam War. Horror fans will enjoy seeing young Robert Englund in a few scenes and voicing the narrator. Yeah. You had already worked with Robert at this point in the play Cyrano de Bergerac. Yeah. Big Wednesday was the first of two projects you did with the legendary writer-director John Milius. He directed Farewell to the King, Red Dawn, Conan the Barbarian, and his writing credits include Apocalypse Now, Clear and Present Danger, and the first two Dirty Harry movies. Surfing scenes were shot in La Libertad in San Salvador, Central California, and the North Shore in Hawaii. What happened to the surfboard you used in the movie?
I still have it.
No, that's awesome.
Yeah, I still have it. I think I have that, and I think PT, who was my stunt double at the time, who was #1 in the world, he has another one, and he lives in Huntington Beach. I talk to PT all the time.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I heard Jan Michael Vincent's dog wandered into the shot and became part of the movie.
That's exactly.
I also heard someone had their nose broken in the fight scene, which was left in the film. Are there
Yeah.
ever any happy accidents like these that happen when performing in theater?
Um, yeah, you know, when you mentioned earlier, um, one of the great things about theater is when things go wrong, the play doesn't stop. You can't
Mhm.
holler, you know, you can't say, let's cut, let's go back, give me that line again, let's do
Mhm.
something else. There's been many things that have gone wrong being up on stage. And the great thing is you got to think on your feet. Somebody wanders up on stage or starts heckling from the audience in the middle of something. It's fun to deal with it. Uh, and and the audiences love it too. They love it when there's something that goes wrong and they know you're trying to deal with it. I remember there was a set piece when I was doing Rolf when we were in San Francisco, and the set piece didn't come out, and we had this whole choreographed dance to do around the set piece, and we had to make something up as we went on stage while we're singing "I Am 16 Going on 17," that famous
Mhm.
song. And what else has happened? I remember when I was doing The Pirate King with George Rose, we were on tour, and my kids came to visit me when they were both really, really young. And one of my favorite things is breaking the fourth wall. In other words, coming, not just relating to people on stage, but coming out to the audience and talking to the audience, right? Delivering lines to the audience. So I took, in front of like 6,000 people, I walked down on the first row and I picked up my son and I put him on my knee and I sang one of my songs with my real son on my lap. And that was a great memory for me.
Oh, that's
That was
awesome.
just terrific.
That's
So another
adorable.
time, I'm thinking of another great, I was on stage with Diana Wiest in New York, the last season of the Phoenix Rep. And
Mhm.
so we were on stage. It was the second of two performances. We gave an afternoon performance and then an evening performance. I had gone home to rest because I was incredibly sick that day.
Mhm.
And I drank too much of cough medicine. And I was very groggy, and I grabbed the bus back across town to the east side. And we got up on stage, and about, oh, I don't know, 45 minutes into the play, this character has this very long speech, like a 2 or 3 page speech. And everybody is standing around in a circle, all the sisters. The story is this, Diana Wiest and I were supposed to be having an incestuous affair. And all the family knew about it, that this brother and sister were having this affair, but no one talked about it, right? But it was understood. So I had this big speech I'm giving, and I'm in the center, and I'm delivering this speech, and I went up. I couldn't remember the words. And I went around to each actor, looking them straight in the face and with fear in my eyes. And everyone was like this, just knowing that I was dying on stage. I turned to one and I turned to the audience. I said, I'll be right back. And I ran off stage to the side of the stage where the stage manager carries a book right
Yeah.
on the side, the wings of the stage, right
Mhm.
behind the scenes. And I looked where my lines were, and then I walked back on stage and delivered the rest of the speech. That's a great memory.
When you performed as Pippin on stage for the legendary choreographer and director Bob Fosse, how
Right.
destroyed were your feet after a month playing the character barefoot every night?
Oh, no, no. Well, for one thing, we rehearsed in New York, and then we flew to Toronto and we did it up there. And we really only did about 5 or 6 performances with a
Mhm.
live audience. And the last day they brought the camera up on stage with no audience.
Mhm.
Um, but my feet, you know, like I said, that I grew up surfing, so I was always walking around on a beach and on
Mhm.
rocks barefoot. So my feet were pretty tough at the time. So it didn't bother me.
The Big Wednesday has become a cult film celebrated in the surfing community. In 2004, you were asked to present one of the Association of Surfing Professional Awards. at their annual World Championship Tour ceremony and were met with wild applause from the audience. I would like to ask you 3 trivia questions about surfing, if that's okay.
Sure.
On what Hawaii island is the Banzai pipeline located?
It's on the
Bonsai.
on the North Shore of Oahu.
That's correct. Second question, what California city was nicknamed Surf City, USA?
Huntington Beach.
Yeah.
Wow,
Third question.
I didn't know this was a test. Okay.
Third question is a multiple choice. Where did crime novelist Agatha Christie learn how to surf? A, Cornwall, B, South Africa, C, Biarritz.
Wow.
Biarritz.
I don't know. I'm going to guess South Africa.
That is correct. She was introduced to surfing in 1922 on a trip to South Africa. She became a very good surfer and is thought to be the first Western woman to stand up on a surfboard.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah. I'm very lucky. I've been down there. Got a great surf spot. Jeffries is down there. Jeffries. Oh man. Wow. Yeah. I've surfed in South Africa. That's pretty exciting. A lot of sharks down there.
The Greatest American Hero is so important to so many people across generations. You've given many fine interviews about the show, so I will only touch on it briefly. What was your relationship with Stephen Cannell like, and what role have mentors played throughout your career?
Steve Cannell was, other than my father, probably the most influential man in my life. I mean, he really, my father was here and Steve was here. I mean, they're both indelibly etched into who I am and what I became in my life. I met Steve after they had sent through my agent. I was doing Bonjour La Bonjour in New York at the time. I had read the script and thought it was laugh out loud funny, but I wasn't interested in going to do a TV show at the time. But Steve flew out and saw a performance of Bonjour La Bonjour and took me to dinner. And he made such a great impression on me. He was so charismatic and charming and lovely, and spoke so highly of the show that that I decided I would do it. And when we closed on a Sunday evening, because the shows were early, I jumped on a plane and flew to New York, and we started the next day. My hair was dark like yours at the time, and dyed it back to my natural color, which is blonde, like it was in Carrie. That was my natural color. And we started the show. Steve was instrumental in who I became, other than my father. He was just a lovely gentleman. And by the way, let me jump ahead, because we did an episode of Greatest American Hero. That's, people always ask me, what's your favorite episode? We did an episode called Beast in Black, which was really the only horror episode of Greatest American Hero that we ever did. And what happens is that we experimented with Bob Culp goes into the 4th dimension, and he becomes possessed by this being that takes his body over. And we got so many, the story goes from Steve, is that there were so many objections by fans that they scared the shit out of their kids, that we were never able to do anything like that again. And the network wouldn't allow it. They just said, we want you to chase monsters through the sewers, you know, monsters in rubber suits.
Huh.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah. Did you ever see that episode?
I have not. I've only seen the pilot, sadly. My dad probably saw it when he was a kid, and he's nodding incredibly.
Yeah.
He's like going.
Yeah. Well, yeah, you're a little young, but
yeah.
You're in, you know, this whole podcast is about horror, and that's really the only episode that we ever did that had something to do with horror.
I should have thought about that. There probably would have been, if my dad mentioned it, I probably would have watched it. Yeah.
Okay.
Dad. But
That's cool.
There have been so many references to the greatest American hero in pop culture. It's appeared in professional wrestling on shows like The Big Bang Theory, The Family Guy, and Robot Chicken. Variations of the theme song appear in Seinfeld, 40-Year-Old Virgin, Mystery Science Theater, My Name is Earl, Heroes, Gilmore Girl, Michael Moore's documentary, Fahrenheit 9/11, and I think Billy Idol even sang it at one of his concerts.
He did.
You released an album called Secret Smiles in 1982, which was very successful in Japan and the Philippines. You were once asked what was behind your success in these countries, and you replied they like blondes. Do you think more songs have been written about love, lust, or heartbreak?
Probably all three. That would be a toss-up between all three of them. I bet, I think I Googled once that the word love appears in more songs than any other word,
That's cool. Huh.
Yeah.
I heard a wire broke and left you dangling while filming a flying scene for The Greatest American Hero. You performed a death-defying routine for Circus of the Stars in front of the Moulin Rouge in Paris. Then you fractured your hip rolling off a jeep while filming Baby: The Secret of the Lost Legend in Africa. Is it time for the Academy to have an awards category for stunt performers? And would you tell me about your set being threatened by machete-wielding villagers while filming Baby: The Secret of the Lost Legend?
That's true. I don't think anybody holds a candle to the iconic Tom Cruise. I mean, he's gone far and above anybody, any other actor that I know of in terms of doing his own stunts. I mean, he's just freaking amazing. Everybody has such respect for what he does and what he's able to do as a producer. Oh my God. Not to mention, I'm just a huge Tom Cruise fan. More and more so as he's gotten older and I've gotten older. When I see the book, his body of work, he's just amazing. So yeah, I think that there was an award show years ago for stuntmen. I don't know whatever became of it. I might be wrong. That's what I recall, that there was an award show for stuntmen. What?
Nothing. I was talking off screen on my dad. There was something going on. Dog was walking around and we were trying to stop him.
The dog about to knock over a camera.
Yeah.
Oh, there you go. Let me make a little bit of a correction though. When I fractured my hip, it was on a film called White Ghost. It wasn't Secret.
Oh, it wasn't that.
It wasn't Baby Secret. It was on a film called White Ghost, produced by Wayne Crawford in South Africa, and Wayne Crawford and Andy Lane.
I see.
I was on the back of a Jeep and shooting. And I did it 3 times, and the 3rd time I landed incorrectly and I fractured my hip. It was the last time I really did any big stunt, because I realized Wayne was my friend, and it cost the film company quite a bit of money during holding up the schedule for me to go to the hospital. And then I couldn't move afterwards. They basically had to put me in position, and then the camera would cut to me, but I couldn't move. And that was the last week of filming. I never really did that where I would jeopardize myself, because I realized how important stuntmen are. Lead of a film is indispensable to its completion. Anyway, that's what happened there. But the machete welding villagers, that did happen in just outside of Abidjan when we were shooting Secret of Baby, Secret of the Lost Legend. What had happened on that day was we were shooting, there was no paved roads where we were shooting outside of Abidjan. One of the drivers that were going back and forth from the city to where we were shooting, it was muddy that day and rainy all the time. His car slipped off the road and killed one of the villagers. That was a gal who was carrying something on her head, and he killed her. And so all the villagers came racing over this hill. We're sitting on set doing our scenes, right, working. All of a sudden, one of the ADs, the PAs, come running up and said, "Go, go, 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 go!" And everybody grab something, grab a C-stand or a light, or something, a camera, and we all got on the trucks and just bolted out and had to drive 7 or 8 hours in another direction to circle back to get back to the city of Abidjan because the villagers were going to kill us. It was very exciting, actually, you know.
Jeez.
Yeah.
So I would lose all of my horror credentials if we didn't talk briefly about House. This insanely fun horror comedy has become a cult classic over the years. You give credit to director Steve Miner for the film's twisted humor, but it would not have worked without you and the great cast. Richard Moll as Big Ben, George Wendt plays your neighbor, and Kay Lenz plays your wife, who I think you went to high school with.
We did. She was a good friend of my younger sisters. Yeah.
Oh, that's cool. Would you tell me about the closet monster and the day your son visited the set?
Oh, yeah. You know, and I wish they had a museum. Maybe they have it now, but I always wanted them to have a museum for all these extraordinary monsters that they came up with in the 60s and the 70s.
Mm-hmm.
The problem with that monster is that they were made out of styrofoam and rubber, and it decomposed. The materials decomposed very quickly over time, so they couldn't preserve it in a museum, unfortunately.
Yeah.
They never really did a slow pan across the creature because it was all these different twisted shapes of Vietnam veterans and villagers that had been grotesquely killed during that was all this monster was in that. I wish they had a slow pan over that monster. It was an amazing sculpture. And but I remember my son was like, oh, he was very young at the time. We shot that in '86. So he was 5 or 6 years old at the time, 5. And he came to the set, and when I didn't tell him anything because we were shooting, and he was standing on the sideline. And the monster, this giant monster, pops out and is moving because they're moving him with cables and stuff.
Yeah.
Son started screaming at the top of his lungs.
Oh my God.
And they had to send him home. They put him in a car, and they had to send him home to my wife.
Jeez.
It was funny.
Do you think comedies age better than horror movies, or is it the other way around?
I think it's the other way around. And obviously the fans are just incredible. I mean, I do a number 3 or 4 of these cons every year for the last several years, and the horror fans are just incredibly awesome. Awesome, these fans. And they really take their horror seriously. You know, I'm so lucky I got to do House, one of the most fun sets I've ever been on, doing that film, working with Richard Moll and George Wendt. One of my very, very favorite scenes that I ever did was with George Wendt when we're upstairs, and I put these goggles on his face, right? And I put the goggles on the face, and I hand him a harpoon, and I said, "Here, there's a raccoon in the closet, a big raccoon, right?" And I remember he was so funny. I could barely get through the scene as an actor because he was just so precious. What he was doing. It was just basically his reactions. He didn't have much dialogue, as I recall. One of my favorite scenes ever.
Your father appeared in the film Night of the Zombies in 1981. Richard Moll's Big Ben came back as a zombie to get revenge on Roger Cobb in House. I read you were up for a part in The Walking Dead at one point, and a 10,000-year-old man who never dies is the subject of your film, The Man from Earth. Do you know who else has who never dies? Zombies. Do you prefer fast zombies or slow zombies?
Why do zombies always walk so slow? It's a question you probably know.
I mean,
is that an old way of thinking? They don't walk that way now.
No, they still walk slow sometimes, but no, slow zombies have more of the effect like the Mummy does, where they're always going after you and they're not really you're not really able to stop them. They're always coming towards you. It may be slow, but they're always coming. Fast zombies are their raging monsters chasing after you, and they're quick. But that's like the difference between them. But yeah, do you prefer fast zombies or slow zombies?
I prefer slow zombies.
No.
I'll outrun them.
Sorry, I'm going back a little bit, but about Carrie, did you ever meet Stephen King?
I never did. In fact, but I'm a huge fan. Just a huge fan. I'm reading Billy Summers' one of his recent books right now. Always been a huge fan of his. PJ told me that he did show up on set one day, but I was not there. I wasn't working that day.
Dang, that sucks.
I know.
So
I always thought I would like to write him a letter and let him know and thank him, because he's really instrumental in giving me a career. I was allowed to be in that film.
Yeah, that's awesome. You gave an interview in 1977 about a romance you starred in called First Love with Susan Day. You said you admired and wanted to emulate romantic actors from old Hollywood. So this last question is a Sophie's choice. Two must die so that one may live. The movies of Clark Gable, the films of Jimmy Stewart, or the films of Cary Grant.
Oh,
two of them must cease to exist, and one of them can stay.
Jimmy Stewart.
Jimmy Stewart stays?
Jimmy Stewart.
Why is that?
Well, I was a great fan of Westerns. Jimmy Stewart's appeared in so many great Westerns. But also he was well known as being the everyman. He had that persona. He was the everyman. He wasn't like super buff, or he was just the guy. He was the always kind of played the reluctant hero. I like that. I like that a lot. And the fact I worked with my mom.
That too.
Yeah.
But okay, Jimmy Stewart's movies. That's cool. Is there anything you want to ask me before we go?
Well, how did you find yourself getting into doing these podcasts? I remember we met. Well, I want to tell the audience, we met in Atlanta at a and you came up to me and were so intriguing to me that you asked me if I would do this podcast, and I said I would be delighted. And lo and behold, here it is. Months later, here we are. So, what got you involved in doing this type of thing?
What happened was I've always been a fan of horror movies. That's just like, I've been watching horror movies since like I was 3 years old. My first movie was The Blob that I didn't finish until I was 10.
Wait, the Steve McQueen Blob?
Yeah, Steve McQueen Blob.
Oh, wow.
That one terrified me. I was so scared of that thing. I couldn't get past the blob moving up the stick to the guy's hand. But yeah, I've always been a fan of horror movies, but there was this point, it was during the COVID lockdown. I was upstairs in my room and I walked down to like get a snack. I was hungry. So I was going to make like chicken nuggets. And my dad and my grandmother were watching a documentary about Kane Hodder, who was Jason in Friday the 13th Part 7.
And he was the stuntman on House, by the way.
And he was I knew about that. Yeah. He also apparently broke his back on House 2. Almost broke his back on House 2, like swinging down something. Interesting story. But that's not the point. So I was watching a documentary. They were watching a documentary about him, and I got really intrigued because like I was like, whoa. Okay. And I sat down and ate, and I ended up watching the movie like 3 times over. And I was like, I turned to my dad and I was like, I want to talk to that guy. And he was like, well, do you want to be like memorable to him, or do you just want to meet him? And I was like, I'd like him to remember me. And he was like, let's do something special then. And we decided on, how about we interview him? And I had no experience on interviewing, but I met him on this online convention circuit called GalaxyCon, and I I talked to him and I said, how many interviews do I have to have for you to get on the show? And he said, how about 5? I think this is my 28th interview and he has still not come on the show, but I got his email. So it'll happen soon, hopefully.
Okay. Well,
But
Dax,
yeah.
I have his phone number in my phone over here. So I'll text him and I'll put a good word in for you. Okay?
Thank you so much. That would be awesome. But yeah, that's the reason I started, but then I came to love interviewing people. I love their reactions to the stuff. I really tried to dig deep and get some good questions.
You do dig deep.
But yeah, that's what started it all.
Okay.
But yeah. Thank you for sitting down with me. This was what?
Anything coming up?
Oh yeah, is there anything coming up for you?
I just did a film with Alfred Molina,
Mhm.
who is, famous for so many things.
Mhm.
Wonderful actor. Most of your fans would know him from the Spider-Man movies. He played the
Mhm.
bad guy
Yeah.
in the first 2. I did a film.
Dr. Octopus. Yeah.
Yeah. I did a film with him recently called When We Get There, and
Oh, that's
that's
cool.
coming out in the next, I don't know, 4 to 6 months sometime.
That's awesome.
Yeah, he was awesome.
Yeah, thank you for sitting down with me.